"This isn't the place for dreamers," Dr. Harrison's voice cut through the prestigious medical conference hall like a scalpel. The young doctor in the worn blazer clutched his research papers tighter, his groundbreaking cancer treatment protocol suddenly feeling heavy in his trembling hands. Around him, polished medical executives exchanged knowing smirks, their designer suits and decades-old reputations forming an impenetrable wall of privilege. In the back of the room, a distinguished figure in a perfectly tailored gray suit shifted in his seat, his familiar face hidden in the dim lighting. The International Medical Innovation Summit sparkled with luxury, crystal chandeliers casting golden light across marble floors, name badges dripping with titles and achievements, the air thick with power and prestige. Dr. Michael Chen stood alone at the podium, his revolutionary treatment methodology, developed in countless sleepless nights at an underfunded public hospital, reduced to an object of ridicule. The whispers grew louder, each suppressed laugh and dismissive gesture, a reminder that breakthrough ideas meant nothing without the right connections, the right background, the right pedigree. As Dr. Harrison stepped forward to formally deny the young doctor's presentation slot, time seemed to slow. The rustling of expensive suits, the quiet murmur of anticipated humiliation, the subtle shifting of power cementing itself, it all crystallized into a moment of perfect injustice. But in the shadows of the back row, Hugh Jackman had seen enough. The actor's jaw tightened as he watched the scene unfold, his presence about to transform from anonymous observer to unexpected champion of truth. Dr. Michael Chen could feel his dream crumbling beneath the weight of tradition. 6 years of research, countless nights spent in the hospital's basement lab, thousands of data points showing unprecedented success rates, all of it condensed into the papers that trembled in his hands. The fluorescent lights above seemed to buzz in harmony with the whispers around him, each moment stretching into an eternity of quiet humiliation. His revolutionary immunotherapy protocol, developed while working double shifts at City General, had already saved 17 lives in preliminary trials. But here, in this marble-floored temple of medical aristocracy, those lives meant nothing without the right letterhead, the correct institutional backing, the proper pedigree. Dr. Harrison's perfectly manicured hand rested on the podium like he owned it, his Swiss watch catching the light as he prepared to formally deny Chen's presentation slot. The conference program was already too full for unproven theories from unknown sources, regardless of their potential to save lives. In the front row, department heads and hospital board members nodded in practiced synchronization, their collective authority forming an invisible barrier between innovation and acceptance. The tension in the grand hall thickened as Dr. Harrison's smile grew colder, more calculated. "We maintain certain standards here," he announced, each word precisely chosen to cut deeper than the last. Revolutionary claims require revolutionary credentials. The assembled medical elite shifted in their seats, a ripple of expensive fabric and quiet superiority. Chen's research data, carefully compiled from hundreds of patient outcomes, suddenly felt insignificant against the weight of institutional politics. From his position near the back, Hugh Jackman leaned forward slightly, his expression darkening. He'd come to this conference as a patron of medical research, interested in breakthrough cancer treatments after his own experience with skin cancer. What he was witnessing wasn't the protection of medical standards. It was the suffocation of innovation by ego and established power. The actor's hands gripped his armrests tighter as he watched Chen's shoulders slump under the collective dismissal of his life's work. Something had to give, and soon. Dr. Harrison's voice carried across the hall with practiced authority. Perhaps in a few years, with proper institutional backing. The dismissal hung in the air like poison, its meaning clear to everyone present. Chen would never get that backing, not from the right institutions, not with his background, not with his unconventional approach. The young doctor began gathering his papers, each movement a quiet admission of defeat that seemed to please the watching crowd. But something shifted in the atmosphere as Hugh Jackman stood up, his chair scraping against the marble floor with deliberate slowness. The actor's presence, until now carefully understated, suddenly filled the room with its intensity. Those nearest to him fell silent first, their eyes widening in recognition. The wave of whispers spread outward. "Is that Hugh Jackman? What's he doing here?" The same people who moments ago had been smirking at Chen's humiliation now straightened in their seats, suddenly uncertain about the show they'd been enjoying. Hugh Jackman moved through the crowd with measured steps, each movement carrying the quiet confidence that had made him famous. But this wasn't a movie set, and the emotion in his eyes wasn't scripted. He'd been following Dr. Chen's research for months, ever since his own brush with cancer had opened his eyes to the desperate need for innovation in treatment methods. The young doctor's preliminary results had caught his attention, not because they came from a prestigious institution, but because they worked. Dr. Harrison, Jackman's voice carried the same authority he brought to his most powerful roles. But this performance was fueled by genuine conviction. "I've been sitting here wondering what's more revolutionary, Dr. Chen's treatment protocol, or the fact that this room full of healers seems more concerned with pedigree than saving lives." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the soft sound of Chen's papers settling in his trembling hands. Harrison's practiced smile faltered as he realized the audience's attention had shifted dramatically. The actor reached the podium in a few long strides, positioning himself next to Chen with deliberate purpose. "I've spent the last 3 months reviewing Dr. Chen's research, not as a medical professional. I'm clearly not qualified for that, but as someone who's faced cancer and watched others fight it. And I have some questions about why we're so quick to dismiss a treatment that's already saving lives." Dr. Harrison's composure cracked slightly as he attempted to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Jackman, while we appreciate your interest in medical research, there are established protocols, peer review processes." But Jackman wasn't finished. He pulled out his phone, his next words silencing the room. "Like the peer-reviewed paper Dr. Chen published in the International Journal of Experimental Oncology, the one that's been downloaded over 20,000 times in the past month?" The crowd stirred uncomfortably. Some began quickly searching on their own phones, their expressions shifting from dismissal to surprise as they found the paper. Chen stood straighter, drawing strength from this unexpected alliance. The data was there. It had always been there, waiting for someone with enough influence to make others actually look at it. "Or perhaps," Jackman continued, his voice carrying a hint of steel beneath its professional courtesy, "we should discuss the 17 patients who are alive today because Dr. Chen refused to wait for institutional approval before developing his protocol. I've met 3 of them. Would you like to hear their stories, Dr. Harrison? About how they were told to get their affairs in order before they found their way to City General and Dr. Chen's unproven treatment?" The atmosphere in the hall had transformed completely. The same medical professionals who had been smirking at Chen minutes ago were now leaning forward in their seats, their expressions a mix of shame and growing interest. Dr. Harrison's face had lost its practiced confidence, replacing it with something closer to panic as he watched his authority crumble in real time. "I've spent my career playing characters who stand up for what's right," Jackman addressed the entire room now, his voice carrying decades of dramatic training and genuine passion. "But today, I'm not playing a role. I'm standing here as someone who's faced cancer, who's watched friends and family face it, who understands that sometimes the most important breakthroughs come from the most unexpected places." He turned to Chen, gesturing at the research papers. "Doctor, I believe you were about to present something that could change lives, and I think everyone in this room owes you their full attention." The young doctor's hands had stopped trembling. He looked out at the sea of faces that had previously dismissed him, seeing something new in their eyes: respect, curiosity, and perhaps a touch of fear at having almost missed something revolutionary. Dr. Harrison stood frozen at his podium, watching as decades of gatekeeping authority dissolved in the face of truth, backed by star power. Dr. Michael Chen took a deep breath and stepped forward, his research data displayed on the screen behind him. The numbers told a story that no amount of institutional bias could ignore: an 84% response rate in patients who had exhausted all traditional options. Each data point represented a life extended, a family given hope, a breakthrough that had been dismissed because it didn't come from the right source. "The treatment protocol we developed at City General," he began, his voice finding its strength, "was born out of necessity. We didn't have the luxury of million-dollar labs or corporate funding. What we had were patients who had run out of options and a theory that challenged conventional wisdom." The slides changed, showing before and after scans that drew audible gasps from the audience. Hugh Jackman watched from nearby, a quiet smile playing at his lips, as he saw the same medical elite who had dismissed Chen now leaning forward, taking furious notes. Dr. Harrison had sunk into a chair in the front row, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension as he watched years of assumptions about innovation and authority crumble before him. The whispers in the room had transformed from dismissive to amazed, the energy shifting from suppression to possibility. "The breakthrough came when we stopped following the traditional pathway," Chen continued, his confidence growing with each word. "The data on the screen told a story of innovation born from desperation, of thinking beyond established boundaries because lives depended on it. We found that by combining modified immunotherapy with targeted delivery, we could achieve results that the standard protocols said were impossible." The medical professionals in the audience had abandoned any pretense of skepticism. Many were already pulling out their phones, sending urgent messages to their research teams. In the front row, a renowned oncologist stood up, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Dr. Chen, these results, they're revolutionary. Why wasn't this brought to our attention sooner?" The irony of her question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Hugh Jackman stepped forward again, his response gentle but pointed. Perhaps because too often we confuse authority with expertise and tradition with truth. He gestured to Chen, who stood tall at the podium, no longer the dismissed outsider, but a pioneer whose time had come. Sometimes it takes someone working on the front lines, someone with everything to prove and nothing to lose, to see solutions that the established system misses. Dr. Harrison slowly rose from his seat, the weight of the moment visible in every movement. The room fell silent as he approached the podium, all eyes watching this unexpected confrontation between old power and new truth. But when he reached Chen, what happened next surprised everyone. He extended his hand. "I was wrong," Harrison said, his voice carrying the humility of someone facing a paradigm shift. "Not just about your research, Dr. Chen, but about what innovation looks like, where it comes from." The handshake that followed was more than a gesture. It was a visible shifting of the old guard, making way for the new, captured in countless photos by the astonished audience. Hugh Jackman watched from the side, his mission accomplished. He'd come to this conference hoping to support promising cancer research, but he'd ended up participating in something more profound. The moment when merit finally triumphed over status, when life-saving innovation broke through the barriers of tradition. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for Chen's breakthrough. It was for every outsider who'd ever been told they didn't belong, every innovator who'd been dismissed because they didn't fit the expected mold. The hours following Dr. Chen's presentation transformed the International Medical Innovation Summit into something it had never been before, truly innovative. The young doctor found himself surrounded by the same medical professionals who had dismissed him earlier, now eager to discuss collaboration possibilities and implementation strategies. Research directors from major hospitals huddled around his preliminary data, their previous skepticism replaced by urgent excitement about the potential to save lives. Hugh Jackman stayed throughout it all, watching with satisfaction as the medical establishment's walls crumbled in the face of undeniable results. He observed as doctor. Harrison, in a complete reversal, personally introduced Chen to key department heads and funding committees. The actor had played many heroes on screen, but helping real innovation break through felt more significant than any role he'd ever performed. By evening, videos of the confrontation and transformation had spread across medical social media channels. The story resonated far beyond the medical community. It became a symbol of innovation triumphing over institutional barriers, of merit breaking through prejudice. Dr. Chen's phone buzzed constantly with messages from other young researchers who had faced similar dismissal, now finding hope in his victory. The conference's closing session was hastily reorganized to feature an extended presentation of Chen's protocol, with Dr. Harrison himself introducing it as the kind of breakthrough we risk missing when we let hierarchy blind us to brilliance. Hugh Jackman's presence had catalyzed the change, but it was the undeniable power of Chen's work that transformed skeptics into supporters. The actor sat quietly in the back, watching as the medical. 3 months later, Dr. Chen's protocol had been implemented in 12 major hospitals across the country. The preliminary results exceeded even his own expectations, with survival rates that shattered conventional treatment statistics. But perhaps more importantly, the barriers that had once seemed insurmountable began to crumble across the medical establishment. Young researchers from unconventional backgrounds found their ideas being heard, their innovations evaluated on merit rather than pedigree. Dr. Harrison, true to his transformation, became an unexpected champion of institutional change, establishing a new grant program specifically for promising research from non-traditional sources. And Hugh Jackman, who had sparked this revolution with a simple act of standing up for truth, received countless letters from doctors and patients alike, thanking him for helping to usher in a new era of medical innovation. But he always redirected the praise to where it belonged, to the brilliant young doctor who had refused to give up, even when the entire system stood against him.